The greatest thing from Quebec since Celine Dion and GSP.
A pair of siblings, a couple of stellar young men.
Two brothers.
These two young men, two siblings, the hard-hitting pair, represent Canada.
Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we actually have a real woman in the studio. For those that don't believe me, we're actually going to do a test with Alex to prove that this is not Alex with a voice changer speaking to me as business as usual. So this is for all our audio listeners. I'm going to count to 3. They're both going to say hello. And you're going to know that there are indeed two other people in the studio with me. So Alex, please. 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, there may be only one person. It wasn't synchronized.
Right. So now that that's settled, we can move on to presenting our guest. So this is our second rendition of a recurring guest. I guess I said that right. I think so. Now, this is Anna, one of the first thinking sis. And she's also the inventor of moderation, something like that. Moderation. And I've personally never heard of it. Do you want to tell us a few words about what that is and why black and white thinking and going all in on things is better?
Yeah, I was about to say that it's the opposite of black and white thinking, which may be why you've never heard of it. Moderation. We may talk about it because it has something to do with the book we've been reading this week.
Okay, so we're gonna just tease it and maybe we'll get to it. Now, thanks a lot for coming in.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nice.
Well, the first thing we're going to be talking about is your suggestion. So it's going to be, let me refresh my French here. I'm a little rusty. Faites-vous même votre malheur by Paul Watzlawick, just for the American version. Do you want to say the Czech version?
So first, he's not Czech. He's Austrian. If that's a thing.
Yep.
So Paul Watzlawick, and actually the original title is The Situation is Hopeless but Not Serious, The Pursuit of Unhappiness.
Which is also the end of the book, right?
Which is the end of
In
and the
French.
start of the book too.
Okay.
So yeah, the original version was in English and we read it in French.
Yep. You got to refresh that, right? You got to refresh your French. We did some Sartre. We did this one. Hey, we may do some Camus later on, but whatever. So is that it? Okay, so that's your presentation. Okay. So, quick thing about the book. So I guess you would call it a satire?
Or a parody. I'm not sure what the difference is. Maybe it doesn't matter.
Intuitionally, I would go with parody. It feels right. Because, yeah, satire is I guess it's more subtle. Like, I wouldn't compare Animal Farm to this, but essentially, he's like, okay, I'm tired of these self-help books, so you guys have enough of them. And this is in like 1980.
Yep.
So he had enough back then. Think about that. Imagine us here. And now he wants to make a book that kind of recommends the opposite. So he tells you the exact ingredients to make yourself unhappy. Find your own unhappiness. Now, it's fun because by taking this other perspective, he doesn't just retell all the self-help stuff, but from the other angle. He actually has a lot of original ideas that wouldn't even be talked about if we weren't talking about unhappiness rather than happiness. Don't you think so?
Yeah, that's right. I do feel like there's a big difference between like being happy and being unhappy isn't necessarily the opposite of each other. And it's a book. So the author is a psychologist, and the book is a lot about psychopathology.
Well, whatever that meant in the 80s.
He's a Jungian,
yeah.
And so yeah, he seldom states explicitly some psychopathologies like depression or anxiety disorders, but clearly this is what the book is about. So it's more about mental health, I feel, than about happiness in itself.
Fair, but it's also all the people operating right under the threshold of pathology do experience this in their everyday lives, I'm sure.
Yeah, actually, right.
And whatever you can call anxiety, but not an anxiety disorder, is due to exactly what he's talking about. So I think it's pretty fair to kind of apply it to everyone. Now, do you guys want to kind of use the chapters as bullet points and talk about every part of it?
Yeah, we could do that. I've grouped some of those chapters together because they talk about the same thing. But let's go.
Okay. In your conceptual map, because you're a smarty pants?
Yes.
Okay. Well, do you want to start? Do you have a structure in your mind, or can you read this and remember what we were talking about?
I don't see it quite well. Yeah.
Okay. I'm passing the mic to Alex.
Well, I think since you wrote those notes, I think it's better if you had an idea in mind of doing it. But just about what you were saying earlier, I feel like Anna is right about it not being it not being strict opposites, a self-help book and this book right here. I feel like the self-help books don't really focus on stopping misery. It's more like you start from a neutral state and how do you get higher, right? They don't really focus on how to not be anxiety ridden. I feel mostly it's about like how to strive higher, how to be better. And this one did feel, I think, 1980. It's like DSM-3. The criteria are established or whatever, but it really is, you get a feel of the cognitive distortions that are present and that we talk about in psychopathology. And, as opposed to how to beat them with like cognitive therapy or whatever, it's how people develop them. And just in general about the book, it struck me as interesting because it's really interesting to see how obvious these things are. Or like you read them and you're like, oh yeah, of course this would make someone miserable, and yet how common all this behavior is. Extremely common. Maybe taken to the extreme in this book, but nonetheless very common in everyday life. And as you said, it's, even if you're not diagnosed with depression or an anxiety disorder, people have these sub-threshold behaviors that make them more miserable than they could be. And you really see that manifested in pretty much everyone. So yeah, it applies widely.
Yeah. Maybe we could go with the first chapter, which is a good example of that. So it's like being the recommendation to be unhappy is to be true to yourself, aka be rigid. So what you have to choose one principle to guide your actions and always follow through. You have to choose one goal, you never deviate. Even if alternative goals or alternative path to that goal seem more reasonable or more beneficial, you should not ever change. Be rigid. And so that's the first thing he says we should do to be unhappy. And it very much resonated with me. What about you?
Yeah, I think if we were to, at the end, just come back and try to remember the main points of the book, rigidity would definitely be there. Never update your beliefs on new information. That's like the recipe for unhappiness. Now, he talks about, I think I made a link here with Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, because at the beginning of the chapter, he talks about see the past through rose-tinted glasses. Oh, no, that's next chapter. Pardon. So he says, be very rigid, be only loyal to yourself. And here he kind of links it with becoming a naysayer, just a contrarian, just for the sake of becoming contrarian, just because you're so kind of self-absorbed. And he has this quote that, well, the fate leads the unwilling and drags the... Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. So he's like, well, we live in determinism, but I think he still perceives that the most precious thing humans have access to is free will. And it's the same thing, 2 + 2 = 4 without my will. So just in this kind of controlling act of self-loyalty and rebellion against the world, you would just become a contrarian. So would that kind of summarize the first chapter well for you?
The idea of contrarian, I don't really get it.
Just saying no for the sake of saying no. So you're at a table, someone proposes an idea, you don't even have a formed opinion, but you disagree with them just because that gives you a personality.
Yeah, there's this quote where he says that, it's not his quote, he quotes someone else. Maturity is being able to say yes to something that your parents asked you to do. So being able to not refute something just because it was recommended by someone else. And I think that this rigidity or this being a contrarian in the sense that you don't do what's rational, you do something because you want to be faithful to some values that you have or some beliefs that you had in the past. He does say clearly that this is bad and this is too rigid. Quite often, the solution, what would make you happy would be to be rational and realize that the way you're acting, maybe it was good before, but it's not the right one anymore, and you should update your beliefs, update your actions. And so to be unhappy, indeed, he really recommends to just don't listen to your rationality, don't listen to advices that other people give you, just follow through.
Yep, I'm pretty sure that a lot of what you said comes later in the book.
Yeah.
Right, and the next chapter indeed talks about kind of how you can manipulate everything about the past to certainly become unhappy, right? So I can give you the 4 major points, right?
Yep.
No, first of all, you got to see it through rose-tinted glasses. Whatever's in the past was the best time of your life, right? You have to live in the delusion that high school wasn't a time of anxiety, stress, and being lost in life, but actually represented the best years of your life. And your childhood was amazing, and it is only now that everything is horrible. Okay, and the added benefit from that, which is point 2, is that focusing on the past and how beautiful it was will distract you from the present. Now, the present is supposed to be where all the happiness is found, so obviously it would be very profitable for you if you just forgot everything about the present and you lived in the past. Number 3 is The Fatal Glass of Beer. So it's a comedy about a young man who wants to drink his first glass of beer, which becomes the source of a lot of misery. And I think the biggest takeaway for this book for me is just that unhappiness is a self-feeding loop. Like 80% of the book is essentially just that. And it's a comedy from 1933 about a young man that starts a chain of miseries in his life just because he indulged in his first occurrence of a sin, right? And the beauty of that is that once you try your first sin, well, in this case, it's a glass of beer, everything that happens afterwards, so your addiction, every single action that you do in function of that, well, as a result of that addiction, can be blamed on that first glass of beer. It's out of your hands, right? It's out of your hands. You can't do anything about it anymore. Now, hey, I related to this. It often happened that in my darkest phases, what kept me in the loop is actually starting my day off incorrectly, okay? So this to people like you, it may sound like the stupidest thing ever, okay? But look what I did, okay? So I had a horrible day. I played video games, ate horribly, and I was like, okay, you know what? Tomorrow's the day. But I should just enjoy today to the max because I know that tomorrow is the start of a new day. So I play video games until 1 in the morning, and the day after I wake up at 9 all grumpy, right? And I'm like, well, if I had to have a perfect day, I'd be waking up at 6 and I'd be full of energy. So this must be a bad day. And then I'd waste away the entirety of the rest of the day. And that would happen, I don't know, around 180 times.
And I think this is really well placed in the playing with the past chapter, because it really does have to do with time for me. I related a lot with this specific subpoint because with my optimistic view of humanity and how I feel everyone is a good person deep down, I feel like the solution, or rather, it's better to say like the reason people fall in these loops, as you said, of being a bad person, is because they let the past affect them, and they say, "Look, I've done this thing in my past, you know, either this morning or in my life. If it's like a big gap you crossed, right? And this changes me, right? I'm a different person because I did this. I am now not worthy of whatever, God's love or my own love or whatever it is." And the solution to that, as this chapter emphasizes, is being in the present. So it could be literally 5 minutes ago I ate a chocolate and I really shouldn't have eaten a chocolate. And it for a lot of people, the loop is I ate a chocolate, I'm a bad person. That makes you feel even worse. And so you want to do a bad thing for yourself. So you eat more chocolate. And the solution really is living in the present and saying, look, I did this thing because I had my temptations, because in that moment I had a moment of weakness. But you have to have the knowledge that in the present, we spoke earlier of free will as like the bad thing, but I feel here it's the good thing, right? You can here the free will is what can make you defy the odds of your unconscious or whatever, if that is the unconscious, and just say, no, this is where I break the cycle. And you can do that at any moment.
Yeah, definitely. Because one crucial idea is that of fatality. Is that a word in English?
Fatality?
Fatality. So it's the idea that if something happened in the past, like you ate that chocolate or you failed one exam, and now you're in the present and you think, because that happened before, there's nothing I can do now. It's fatal. It's out of my control now, and I will for sure keep going down in this path of mediocrity. So that's a big idea. And if you just realize, okay, I'm in the present, whatever happened before, I can choose now. I can choose to act differently now. And this is what gets you out of this loop. Which
links with Zen Buddhism quite well.
Funny enough, I was going to link it to two other things, none of which are Zen Buddhism. First of all, I was going to link it to Aristotelian virtue ethics, which essentially states that you are and your morality are defined by your actions. So in a sense, if I had woken up at 9, but then until 12 I had done only good things, then I would have been a person who has done one bad thing in that day and like 3 other good things. So until 12, until noon, my tally would have been that I am a good person. And this relates back to our episodes on Succeed, where a malleable theory of, I guess there was intelligence, but here it can be of morality or doing good. And the more malleable you are, the more... So for example, for intelligence, the people who had a malleable theory of intelligence got better throughout the semester. But the people who had a static theory, and it goes back to point number 1, which is rigidity, as soon as they got a bad grade, they did same or worse on the next exam. Right? So essentially, once you if you have a rigid theory of something, as soon as something happens, that defines you. That just tells you, okay, well, I failed once. People don't change. Therefore, I'm a bad person because I failed once. And that's what bad people do, right? And the more malleable you are, the more you can get out of this. But of course, the point of this book is to find your unhappiness. So why am I even talking about how to get out of it? So yeah, essentially rigidity and what were we talking about? Anyway, if point 4 is kind of rigidity and it's insisting. And it's exactly the thing that you said earlier, right? Never update your beliefs. If you found a solution in the past that was the best for your problem, that's it. That's the best. That has to be the best solution until the end of days. You can only do that. And if it fails, well, I don't know. It's unlucky. You should try again and pour more effort into doing that solution. And again, here, I would have liked, my style on my blog on thinkinbros.com, my style of, thought experiment or example, but it almost opens up more doors that he keeps it vague here, because he just says about like generally insisting, right? I don't think any specific examples are given here.
No, he didn't give any specific example. What he did say is that this habit of just going through rigidly made some species go extinct. I'm not sure exactly what he was referring to, but I thought it was quite strong of a statement.
Has to be the dodos. They look quite rigid.
And I was actually thinking about like teachers, old-fashioned teachers who just reject all technological tools and keep going with their own old-fashioned way to do. And we would say they're like dinosaurs in the school system.
I would never.
So that's the only example I thought about, but for sure there are many others.
great example, but it's also, it can be related to so many things that you would hear in a psychologist's chair, right? Like, I don't know, a solution in a relationship that was in the past a good one, and then now you're just trying again. It's not working, but it's because you both changed, and that's obvious.
So actually, I have another example. I was thinking about parents who have maybe two children. One of them is typically developing, and let's say the other is autistic, for example, because I know about that. And their reflex will be to use the same strategies with both kids. Talk loud, give a lot of stimulations, whatever they do. And it doesn't work with the second one. The autistic kid will maybe do tantrums, and they don't understand why, because it did not create the same outcome with the first kid. And definitely in this situation, they would have to adjust and change the way they act. Otherwise, if they just keep persisting, if they think, well, I threw a party, it was great, there was so much light, so much music, so much people, and this was one of the favorite parties that our first kid went to. And so let's do the same thing for our other kid for his 10th birthday, let's say. And they just persist, and the kid is very uncomfortable because all those stimulations is problematic for him. So the parents think, oh, well, maybe there's not enough music, maybe there's not enough people, maybe there's not enough cake and food or whatever. So they just keep adding the things to make it even bigger. And of course, this will only feed the loop and lead to dire consequences.
And it seems like, well, I'm lucky to have the mic right now, because if anyone's going to disagree with what I'm about to say, it's going to be Alex, the psychologist. But it seems like, look, the big things that psychologists encounter can really be kind of put into depression and anxiety. And anxiety is kind of an excitatory state, and depression is kind of an inhibitory state. And if we were to divide the problems of, as Buddhism states, the best thing is to live in the present. So if you're messing up, you're either living in the past or the future. So anxiety seems like living in the future, right? Problems are always bigger in your anticipation. You're probably always going to be fine, right? Never, if you always focus on the future and expect things from the world, and those expectations fail, and then you anticipate something bad, blah blah blah. That anticipation is going to have more, is going to weigh on you even more than the event itself, right? It's always like that, and I'm pretty sure it gets to that at some point. Now, depression could be living in the past, and it could be having a rigid theory of either your morality or your competence in the world or your autonomy and whatnot, and you could focus on past failures and be kept down by them, and of course be in a self-feeding loop where, well, you're rigid about your competence, you failed in the past, so that's how it's going to be, and I'm going to be inhibited until the rest of days. Any thoughts on that, Mr. Psychologist?
Well, I don't see why I would have a problem with anything you just said. I mean, in general, depression is marked by exactly, rumination is what they call it, and anxiety is the opposite. So worrying about the future. Anxiety is worry, and depression has rumination. Well, it is general to say that. It presents in many forms and can have, but those are the general ways it presents. And well, what do you mean? I pretty much agree with you. There's some nuance, obviously, but I think that's mainly what people face. And I mean, it shows, I guess, that the guy's a psychologist, because he hits the points. I mean, as I said in the beginning, it's very reminiscent of psychopathology and how people usually, like, the thinking patterns and biases that people usually have when they have a disorder.
This does make sense. I think that we talked about different ways that the past can help us be unhappy, and the two first ones, to glorify the past and have regrets, and the second one, which was to focus all your attention on the past rather than on the present and future, really made me think about depression, grief, and people who have thoughts. Because if you focus all your attention on the past, on what you lost in the past, rather than seeing the new opportunities, whether it's like you lost a job and you don't focus on now you could get a new job, or you broke up and so a relationship has ended and you don't focus on the present, on any new relationship you could have, depression will come from the loss of hope of having one of these relationships in the future. So maybe the future has something to do with depression, because you don't see the future. It's dark. There's no light. There's no possibility in the future. And if we take someone who develops an anxiety disorder, for example, from the same situation, let's say they had an injury in the past, so they lost their job because of that, and now they really focus on everything that happened in the future so that they would get injured again. Now, every time they cross the street, they stress about the fact that they could get hit. And so they will limit everything they do because they want to avoid this, all the risk that it represents. So they will, while the depressive person may see the future as blank, as impossible and hopeless, the anxious one may see it as full of dangers.
Yeah, I can definitely see the link, and where, depressive people do indeed interact with the future and anxious people interact with the past. But I guess, yeah, my categorization was where their focus was, right? Where their energy was being poured. And as we know here, he says it in the later chapter, where you pour your focus is exactly what's going to kind of rule your action and your mood and everything else. So I propose we skip the chapter on Americans and Russians, because it's a very sensitive topic right now. And we can get to a story about a hammer. Now, I know I'm going to mess it up, but it also, because of my memory, but also there's so much of me in it. So I'll try to tell it, okay? So essentially, a man has a nail and he needs to hammer it in, but his neighbor has the hammer. And so he makes up a story in his mind about, his neighbor, the hammer holder, the man who looks down upon him for not having a hammer. How incompetent is he, right? How less resourceful is he? And so he thinks about it, and he's like, you know what? You can keep your hammer. I don't need it. And all of this happens all in his head. There is no conversation to be had there. So he goes and knocks on his door, and he's like, you know what? Keep your hammer, man. I hate you. You can go to hell. I don't even want it. And the entire story, and again, this is kind of an anxiety symptom, I would say, because he anticipated a reality that just wasn't going to happen. So he created his reality, and his reality is dire. But now a thing that we realized a lot in the past, few months, I'd say, is that the things that are in your head can be seen as strictly existing there, and there can be such a barrier between keeping them there and letting them sieve through into the real world. So what happened there, and it sounds like quite a likely story. Essentially, in the book, it sounds more likely because I kind of messed it up a little bit. But you create the reality of finally putting it out into the world, right? Letting your anxieties through. Whereas a person who is based on real events and only considers them and only lives in the present would just be like, okay, right now I need the hammer to hammer the nail in. So right now I know that my neighbor has a hammer, therefore I will go and get it. You ask the neighbor, and whatever happens, happens, really. Even if he is met with with an arrogant look. So, yeah. I think the entire chapter is about where you pour your attention. He gives some, quite masterful techniques. Imagine yourself biting a lemon. Right now, everything could be going great, but you should focus on exactly the pressures that your shoes are applying on your feet, and where there's a little bit of friction, and how your shoes are actually much more horrible than you thought, because now you pour that attention into it. Right, and he progresses, and there comes point number 7 where he mentions that you should, all this reality that you created in your head, you should let it out, talk about it with people you know. But, you should be a confident character. You should know what you're talking about. So all the people who deny what you're saying, well, it all happened in your head, so it must be true. So they must be trying to fool you, right? If you talk about your anxieties and all the things that you've imagined, and, the arrogant look that you might have received from your neighbor if you had gone and gotten the hammer, talk about it with your friend. And if they don't support you in your delusion, in your, rightful theory, then they're the enemy. They're part of the, the master plan to confuse you and keep you down. So yeah, I mean that. Okay, if we want to talk about mental illness that I've encountered recently, in fact, that definitely sounds like it.
I'll let you go in a minute because that will be interesting. I think to put it together, it's about creating your own reality, making what's in your head, your worries in your head, into reality. So if you think about asking for the hammer and then you just ask yourself, oh, but what if he refuses to give it to me? Like yesterday we crossed in the street and he didn't smile, so maybe he won't help me this time. But why wouldn't he help me? That's so like unfriendly. That's so problematic. Oh, he's a problematic person. And so you create all this scenario that, I mean, maybe it would happen in your head, and then you become convinced that it's going to happen, and that's how you go see your neighbor, and you go see him angry, and you.
I don't know. I don't know about how likely the story is. I don't think anyone goes out to their neighbor and.
I think it like maybe not to this extreme, but if you think, okay, I will. I have a job interview and I will go, but I think they won't like me because I'm a girl and it's a business and they don't take girls most of the time. So I will go and I will be on guard. I will try maybe to prove my place, and maybe this will be a bit arrogant, or I won't be myself. And because I was suspecting that they would not have me, would not take me, I will act in a certain way that will make this prophecy actually happen. And what I feared will become reality.
Because of what you thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I definitely agree, and I definitely think that's how a lot of people make themselves miserable. I was just saying about that specific case. If you create a story in your head, so someone came up to you that you didn't know at all and said, "You can keep your hammer, you jerk."
It does happen sometimes in my head that I cross someone, this person doesn't smile, and I start thinking, oh, but why didn't they smile? And oh, maybe this happened. Maybe
but
maybe
since you're well adjusted, like you. Okay, yeah.
Yes, but I may think, okay, maybe they had a bad day, and unconsciously, the next time I see them, I may like assume they had something really bad happen, and I may talk to them with like empathy and say, "Oh, are you okay? Is it fine?" And nothing happened. It's just in my own head that I made scenarios that maybe didn't feel right. This has already happened to me.
Definitely, yeah, definitely, and I think it speaks to how. It's very unique, this book, I feel, because the whole book is all saying how to be miserable. I mean, as the title indicates, but we keep circling back to like specifically what's bad about those habits and what you can do to make it better. And like it teaches you a lot in this sort of ironic way and funny way, exactly what you need to stop doing. I think it's more about what you need to stop doing and not the things that like particular actions that you can take to improve your life. It's just what to be, again, on guard about. And, you know, in what we were talking about earlier with you selecting your friends in a sort of way, and you can reject the people that counter your negative ideas, but in the same way, that's one of the ways, you know, that depression can be maintained, or anxiety for that matter. Is that the thing? For that matter, you self-select your friends that are anxious, and then everyone's anxious, and then they confirm your theory, and it feels good because you're confirmed in your preconceptions. But the thing is, you make yourself miserable because you just like you're depressed, and then you talk about it with your friend, and your friend is like, "Oh yeah, the world is horrible, guys. Let's like." Finally someone that understands me, and there's sort of comfort in that because you have someone else, but also you make yourself more miserable with that. And also in the same way that you definitely can make reality a worse place by thinking these horrible things and taking that out into the world, I think that I think this is what I do. I think that if you see everything in a good light and see even slightly bad things as neutral, or you know, neutral things as good, you definitely make reality a better place. When you act at like someone crosses you and doesn't look you in the eye, and you're like busy, doesn't matter. Like, oh, what are you up to? Like, are you busy? Or, like, are you being productive? How nice to see you, blah, blah, blah. You have time to see me. I don't know. The opposite is definitely true. You can make the opposite true.
Yeah. And if you read my blog, you would know about the idea of yellow lights and how everything can be... Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm not going to... Do you want to add anything onto that? Or can I move to the next chapter?
No, move on.
Okay. So, the bean story. So, a man promises his dying wife to never get with another woman. And then when he obviously does, because, you know how they get, his wife comes back to haunt him every night. And then he goes to a Zen master. And this, it's so flavored with Buddhism, this resolution. I love it. So the Zen master says, oh, right. So, sorry. More about the ghost. The ghost knows everything that's going on in the man's head, and he knows about, she knows about, every one of his escapades. And so he goes to the Zen master, he tells him about this, and the Zen master's like, okay, well, I'm not going to snap him out of his delusion kind of just by telling him. So I guess this is a rational resolution, right? This is like a logical thing. Okay, if the ghost knows everything that you know, no.
Everything.
Yeah, right. If the ghost knew everything, then the ghost couldn't have access to information that you don't have access to. So, one night, when she comes to haunt you, get some beans in your hand and then ask the ghost if she knows how many beans are in your hand. And then, obviously, if you don't know the number of beans, the ghost won't be able to, and this kind of psychosomatic ghost will go away. Now, this made me think about, the therapy where amputees have pain in their other hand, like ghost limb syndrome. And then you kind of do the mirror thing, then you, cut their arm, their non-existing arm off with a mirror illusion, and then the pain goes away because their brain realizes it wasn't there and they can't feel that pain. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, mirror therapy.
Yeah, mirror therapy. So, yeah, it made me think of that, and it's like, well, okay, let me enter your delusion, and let's see how to prove that it doesn't exist from inside it, I guess. Like, you understand the internal workings of the delusion. Like, okay, I see. The ghost knows absolutely everything, right? Okay. Well, can the ghost know something that you don't know? And essentially, obviously, he did the bean trick, and the ghost went away. The ghost was psychosomatic, as I said. Well, he was making the ghost in his head. Okay. So, any thoughts on that?
I don't know about the link with mirror therapy. I just can.
Well, if you got okay, so if they're feeling a chronic pain in their ghost limb, then the brain is thinking that the limb is still there. So you have to do something extremely shocking that kind of breaks through the brain's barriers and really accepts the stimulus that the limb isn't really there. So you shock it into thinking that the limb is being cut off or a knife is being put into it. You break through its barriers, and the brain's like, oh my God, something is attacking my arm. But then it's like, well, but I didn't feel anything. So then there mustn't be an arm. Right? It's like an aggressive...
I mean, I'm not sure what I can say about this apart from like, are you sure? Because we saw it in an episode of like Dr. House probably, that he was like, okay, tighten both your fists. And then the person like felt that tension in, let's say he still has his right hand and he feels that it's tensed up, and then supposedly he sees it in the mirror on his left side and thinks that it's tensed on the left side, and then House says release, and then he releases and both are released, right? And you start not feeling the left one. I don't know if that's a thing in real life. I would guess it's not that easy. But it links back to the ghost in the sense that if this is a thing, right? If it's the pain in your ghost limb is created by your own brain, then you just have to realize, not even rationally, just make your body realize in multiple ways that it is something that you're making up in your head. And as soon as you realize it, it goes away. The ghost goes away, the pain in your ghost limb goes away.
All right, well, I think there are a lot of chapters left. Do we want to focus on some that really kind of touched us? And maybe at the end we can give a summary of the overall recommendations to find your own happiness. Okay, I'm going to give quick summaries. So the next is the anti-elephant powder. So a man is spraying some powder while on the train. Now, the picture he paints seems so, serene. I'd love to be there. Just like, you're on board of a train in the 1980s, just spraying some like anti-elephant powder. I love it. And so when someone asks, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm spraying anti-elephant powder." And the other guy says, "Well, there are no elephants along this train ride." And he says, "Well, of course there aren't. I'm spraying my anti-elephant powder." And this is, I think, it really comes back to living in the past thing and like refusing to accept new information. And essentially, what could be remedied, how this could be remedied, is really by being a scientist, right? Because a scientist would collect data in both an experimental group and a null the placebo group. Yeah, the control can be a placebo. Right, so if you were a real scientist and grounded in reality, of course, I mean, I'm guessing the people he discusses aren't, you would also try some non-anti-elephant powder and see if there appear elephants. And the next train ride, you would try absolutely no powder and see that there aren't elephants at all. But of course, these people are insanely afraid of these, and it's a little bit harder to attack them from the rational angle. But this indeed, on a sub-threshold of pathology level, just grounding yourself in rationality and thinking about like, okay, if I don't use my defense mechanism of being mean to people when I first meet them, will they take advantage of me and be mean to me every time? Or maybe should I test being nice to them and see how they react to that? That's how you get out of these cycles.
And some version of this anti-elephant powder is actually exactly how, some version of this anti-elephant powder is exactly how OCD is described. OCD, in psychopathology classes, OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. You have compulsions. This compulsion, in this case, is if I don't spray a powder out of the window, the elephants will come. And it is a loop. It's a self-feeding loop in the sense that, look, if I step on this crack, I will break my mama's back, right? And you precisely make efforts not to step on cracks, and your mama's back keeps not cracking. Therefore, you should not step on the cracks, and you're justified in not stepping on the cracks. And I feel like if you're living in your own world and are rigid and aren't open to other people's inputs, you will stay in that delusion. And treatment for OCD is specifically like having that obsessive thought and stopping the client or stopping yourself if you're doing it for yourself from doing the compulsion, whose design is to satisfy the obsession. The obsession is I don't want elephants to come, and if you don't do anything to calm that obsession, it's hard in the beginning. It's distressing, and then you realize somehow that the elephants won't come even if you don't spray powder.
So avoidance behaviors, this chapter makes me think a lot about anxiety disorders, not only OCD, but others too. Like if I think about maybe a parent who's very anxious and doesn't want to let their baby play on the ground because there's bacteria and the baby might like fall or hit his head or whatever, like that person will never let their baby play. So they will never realize that the baby is able to play safely. And this will have like very bad consequences, like the development will be compromised and everything. But on another level that's not pathological, I thought about COVID because I thought there was like COVID, there was a threat initially. So we avoided it by like doing a lockdown or wearing masks. We avoid the virus itself. And so if we avoid and if we kept avoiding it, we would never know when the threat is not there anymore. We would not know if if we get vaccinated, but we stay in lockdown, we'll never know that we can get out and be safe again. So that's one way in which like avoiding just doesn't work because you'll never get out of it. But also another problem when you avoid something is not only that you stop doing activities that you like, you stop worrying. Well, you start worrying more actually. But another problem is that you create more problems. With COVID, if you lock yourself down, you don't expose yourself to various viruses.
Well, especially children. Yourself is fine, but like.
And so your immunity is actually worse, and you are more at risk of getting the virus again. So when you get out, when lockdown stops, let's say, and you have your deteriorated immune system, then COVID may actually seem more infectious, but it's not. It's your own defenses that went down. So I felt like that's one loop. And then because with COVID now seems more infectious, so you do another lockdown, and that's a loop. And I feel like it's the same thing. If that mother never lets his kid play, this kid will not develop the skills to play safely by himself. And so once this kid will be let alone to play, maybe he will actually injure himself because he did not develop the skills and the abilities to be safe. So it's really a very bad loop.
Yeah, and again, I guess the fix to that would be to indeed be a scientist, right? Test your hypothesis and its opposite. Because right now, if you only do the lockdown part, and then you see the statistics of, okay, well, infection rates are at this, so it's very manageable, and the hospitals are, manageable. You'll never know the alternative of not doing the lockdown. Now, this is why it's, useful to have independent news sources and compare it with, let's say, countries that didn't do any lockdowns, right? So again, be a scientist, do your research well. A beautiful quote for this principle was, an idea, as long as you attach yourself to it with sufficient conviction, that you caress it and rock it with care, will end up producing its own reality. So I guess this is, a summary of something that we've been cooking up, and also of this whole elephant powder thing. Now we get to the chapter on I Told You So, and it's on self-fulfilling prophecies. And I guess this is, it involves confirmation bias and only focusing on things when they confirm your theory. And obviously, when they disconfirm it, something went wrong in the process, right? Like either we don't have access to full information yet, or something wasn't recorded properly, so you deny or ignore everything that happens against what you're saying, and only focus on what happens that supports your hypothesis. Now, confirmation bias happens in literally everyone, right? There are thousands of studies of people just going to the lab, they're asked about their opinions on something, then they're given 2 articles independently rated to be of the same conviction level, and then they have to rate how good the arguments of these articles are. One is against their standpoint, and one is for, and they're always going to kind of rate the article that is for their standpoint higher, in how convincing it is and how good it is for the world. So again, this is one of the things where, we're not talking about extreme pathological cases, right? We're talking about normal everyday people and normal everyday events. And this I told you so is rampant and infectious. So yeah, now I'm going to say a series of quotes. I'm sure you have some stuff on it because it's about goals. But Lao Tzu said that he recommends forgetting a task once it is accomplished, right? The best way to live in the present, very Buddhistic principle. That's for sure a word. And, not ruminating, not living in the future. You do something, you forget about it. Now here, he discusses the counterintuitive nature of goals and I guess happiness as a whole when you don't really get like deep down philosophically to it. Happiness can seem kind of, its attainment can seem counterintuitive because you're always like, well, okay, I make plans that I think will make me happy. Their pursuit is kind of fine, but I just want the destination. And when I get there, I can't really say that I'm happy. What is going on? Right? So Oscar Wilde said, there are 2 tragedies in life: to not accomplish your dreams and to accomplish them. So this is very, prophetic about how the way, I guess the recommendation against this, right, would be to reframe the way you view happiness as Alan Watts says it in his famous speech. You have to view life as a symphony where every single note matters. And the beauty of it is that there is no false note. Is that the musical term? False? Yeah, so you don't mess up a single note. And when you look back on the, what's the word? Music, the song? What's piano? Yeah, when you look back on the piano piece, nothing, your mind doesn't cling to any, missed note because it was a beautiful symphony. But when you see it as a journey with a destination, well, the destination is always going to be underwhelming because you're either going to undershoot or overshoot what you really want out of life, and you're going to get to it before the end of your life. And when you get to it, you're going to realize, well, first of all, if this is it, then I absolutely don't have anything else to do in life. So this can't be it. And if this isn't it, then what have I been working so hard for? Right? So again, enjoying the process. I don't think he gives this solution specifically, but it's the solution that I've, internalized.
Yeah. So it's a manual to be unhappy. So I thought it was strange that he was recommending to not reach your goals based on quotes that say that people are happier when they do not reach their goal. It's as if this was an advice to be happier. Mm-hmm. But actually what I thought about was, if he's recommending to us to never reach our goal, to dream but never get to our dreams, never accomplish anything, maybe on the surface level, based on those quotes, if we analyze them on the surface level, it may seem like something that will make us happier because we have understood that once we reach our dream, it's never as great and as we had expected. But actually, if you don't accomplish anything, it truly is a recipe for unhappiness. That's just how I took it.
Exactly. So yeah, I guess the solution would again be the love of the process. And here's an interesting fact. This is Thinkin Bros Facts. Woo! First edition of Thinkin Bros Facts. Utopia actually means nowhere. So yeah, if you're always striving for utopia and you want to get to it, according to Travis Scott, we know what utopia means. So yeah, you're getting nowhere. Your objective is nowhere. And I think, there's a really good parallel to be made here with vengeance. That, well, not to be made here. He actually made it. But again, it's like, you always think you're going to be restoring some balance. And it seems like a really, really appealing goal. Like, oh, this man spited me. He bumped my shoulder. Next day, I'm going to see him in the office and guess whose shoulder is going to get bumped. So you spend the night, you work out, you do some shoulder flexion, shoulder abduction, shoulder adduction, and you're ready for the next day. And then you bump him. And then he looks at you with the nicest smile and he's like, I'm sorry. And he's like the nicest person ever. And you're like, oh my God, this is so underwhelming. I messed up. I've been evil. I spent my entire last night on shoulder workouts when I should have been actually chasing my life goals. What have I done? And this is kind of a summary of all vengeances ever because I know people. So, but yeah, essentially, okay, I digressed. I agree. But vengeance is kind of that, right? Vengeance is to not be that.
Okay, so the next point is how to ruin interpersonal relationships, and it is by offering illusory alternatives. So in this way, you give people the choice between two options, but whichever one they choose, you can reproach that other person for not choosing the other option. So for example, you offer two gifts to someone, and if that person wears, like, let's say you offer two hats and that person wears one hat and comes to you, then you can say, hey, well,
you understand me now.
Why? Yeah, I do. Why aren't you wearing that other hat? You didn't like it, right? And you assume they didn't like it. Or you think your partner is cheating on you, and then you ask them, are you cheating? Like, what were you doing yesterday evening? Whatever they say, if they say that they were actually cheating, well, now you know. If they say anything else, they were at the bar with their friends, you can just say that they are lying, and not only are they cheating on you, but they're also lying. So to break those to break interpersonal relationships and be like miserable, you can just interpret whatever the other person says according to what you want them to say in order to be unhappy. And there is a parallel to be made with the Rosenhan experiment. I suppose you guys thought about it when you were reading. It was quite obvious. So the author writes extensively about how psychiatric patients whatever they do can be interpreted as a sign or a symptom of their illness. So that's, I don't know if you have anything more to say. I think you've talked about this in like 3 different episodes.
Very good point. I didn't see that link. Now, the dots connected in my mind, and I remembered something you did last week. So you asked me, do you want to walk? And then I said no. And then you said, of course you don't, you fat fuck. And then I said, okay, fine, yes. And then you said, yes, of course, because you want to see other women. So I guess that would be an illusory choice, right? Just connecting the dots. Now, very good link here. And I would make it another link. I know you don't like this word for some reason, but I think you understand the concept. And it's the concept of the narrative.
Oh, I do like this word.
Okay.
I wrote it everywhere in my notes.
I love that. So yeah, you're just spinning a narrative, right? The conclusion is always there before it starts. And a key point that Neil Postman has explained about narratives is that their best appeal in proving your point is that they're undeniable or unfalsifiable, right? As our friend Popper would say. And exactly, when you come into an interpersonal relationship with that idea in mind, that, oh, look, I have a narrative, whatever that other person says, I already know the answer. This rigidity is coming back, right? This theory of mind of understanding that other people have other perspectives and what happens in your head isn't the reality everyone's living. I think there's some humility to be had here as well, because if you're arrogant enough to think you know what's happening in another person's head, you're going to have those narratives. So it's about humility. I think links to a lot of concepts. Right. If you're arrogant enough to come into a conversation and already know the resolution of that conversation, okay, well, now that sounds like me, so I don't like it. But right, and one of the archetypical arguments in relationships that you would hear about is no one's mad, everything is the status quo, and then someone comes in and says, why are you mad? Right. And then the other says like, oh, if you're pretending to not know, it means you're really mad. And you really get like this when where you're really angry, you really seem the calmest. And I know this, you're playing tricks on me. So classic us.
Classic us. Like, try it tonight, guys. Go see someone, ask them why they're mad, and like in 5 minutes, I'm sure you can get them mad for real. 100%.
Yeah. Well, if they're weaklings on an emotional level. So we're good here.
Yeah.
Am
I going?
Yeah.
So is it the be spontaneous? Yeah. Okay. So being spontaneous, if you ask someone to be spontaneous and they try to be spontaneous, for sure they won't be spontaneous because they're trying to do it. And being spontaneous is something you cannot plan and you cannot force by definition. So the author makes a parallel with being happy. If you give someone the order or you ask someone to be happy, you tell someone they should be happy, it's very hard to be. So the main idea, I think, is that if you think you should be happy all the time, well, for sure you're not. Whenever you're a little sad or even just tired or angry, you'll realize that you're not happy, but you should be happy because your parents have told you that you should smile and you should be happy. And like society gives you self-help books to learn how to be happy. So you should be happy all the time, but you're not. So you think, first, maybe you feel bad, you feel guilty. I'm not a good person. I'm not right. Okay, I didn't say guilty, right? Yeah. So I'm not a good person. I'm like, something is wrong with me. I'm not happy all the time. I don't deserve to be with others. And so you feel guilt, shame. You have no self-esteem. You isolate yourself because you don't think you're worth other people. And this leads you to be very, very unhappy and depressive and alone. And all because you thought you were wrong at being sad sometimes.
Again, powerful links with every single concept we've explored, because every single chapter has a lot of consistency, and everything we link one chapter to can also be linked with another chapter. Here, spontaneity can be linked to happiness, because he essentially argues that spontaneity, you can't be chasing goals that are only byproducts, right? Happiness is a byproduct of something deeper, right? We're probably not going to get into what that is right now, because that would devolve, or upvolve, whatever that means. So, and when you chase spontaneity, is again, right? The Alan Watts example is like, here's a pill, It will cure you, but just don't think of the white elephant. Okay, here, there you go. So yeah, it's never gonna work. So spontaneity has to be the byproduct of something deeper. It can be, I guess it can be carelessness about consequences. Maybe from the Buddhist perspective, that's, you know what I'm saying with that? Where like, I guess if you care too much, when the Zen master asks you, does the water in the sink turn clockwise or anti-clockwise, with the, you know, Eastern anxiety, like, I want to perform on tests, I have to get this right. Western, pardon. You would be like, oh my God, is it this? No, it must be counterclockwise. Oh, maybe it depends on the kid. Like, yeah, you just have to eliminate that anxiety. Again, this is just a theory. Doesn't really matter for our points, but you can see the parallel between happiness and the spontaneity only being byproducts of something much deeper, but people chase them as ends in themselves.
Yeah, obvious links. Yeah, obvious links with Zen Buddhism and Alan Watts, but also I think the Jungian shows here, because as we said last week, the goal for Jung was like reconciling, right, the shadow with the ego and integrating your unconscious into your ego, which is your conscious experience. And well, yeah, that also obviously links with Buddhism, because as you said, the student is the one that's chasing and chasing and chasing, while the master knows that the answer is right there, and the answer is in nothing, is in the experience, is in not chasing, is in being present in the moment. You'll like that I mentioned this because you're usually the one pushing this, but this is the stage 2 that you talk about, right? Stage 2 is thinking about how to strive for happiness, and, you know, chasing this sort of state of whatever happiness is. The reality is, I think, what you realize is you don't really define happiness. Just happiness is found in not ruminating about the past or not thinking too much about the future, and this sort of flow state. The example that I think last time I would have talked about this was probably like episode in the start of the episodes, is like, for me it's soccer, but whatever it is for you, that you're skillful enough that you can not think about the specific skills to exercise, and you're just present in the moment, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. A lot of people, it's in sports, maybe it's in art, maybe it's in whatever your thing is. But I think the trick is to make your life that, right? You don't stress about anything. You're just, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Just like a bee going to pollinate, I'm a human going to do whatever work I have to do. Marcus Aurelius. A lot of links.
Indeed, a lot of links. Like, when I was reading this book, I thought it was special. You mentioned it earlier. Like, this book seems unique. Well, first of all, my theory was that it's kind of a satire, but it's not cringy. You know, it's not like, hey, I'm actually saying this, but I mean the opposite. Haha. He's actually giving you a perfect guide to unhappiness. And look, if you want to take it and use it for happiness, then you can interpret it as that. But this is actually a man who prepared a guide for unhappiness, and this is how you get to it. And it's original, and it's special. But the links in between the chapters that we're making right now and that we made when we're reading, and this kind of, okay, rigidity is kind of omnipresent in every single chapter. Self-feeding loops are omnipresent in every single chapter. Like, it just seems so thought out. It's so rich. It genuinely is. Like, it's a 1-unit book, even though it's divided in like 20 chapters. It's really incredible. Also, I really, again, we can do some democracy here, but I really want to relabel the word spontaneity to spontaneity. It just feels more right. Any thoughts? You know how, like, continuity, like, oh, I have to work on my spontaneity. It just feels right.
Spontaneity.
Does it feel good to say?
Spontaneity.
Right? There's like a disruption there. Right? The A kind of disrupts the whole pattern.
It's more fluid.
It's very fluid.
Yeah, since we're like off topic, I we didn't even mention this, but it's really funny at the beginning of the book that he puts this in practical terms. The medical system is like $1 billion economy thing for everyone, and it's good. Like, what would happen right now if everyone was cured, if everyone was happy? Like, no one go to psychiatric hospitals, no one would go to psychologists, and a huge industry would just be destroyed. So to ensure the good of society, let's make more people miserable and make sure that the economy keeps running. So it's really a good example of continuity.
So the next recommendation for unhappiness is to not love yourself and believe that you are unworthy of being loved. And definitely beware of people who love you, because if they love you, they're probably irrational or maniacs or whatever, because they love someone who cannot be loved. And I have nothing more to say about that. Do you?
Yeah, no, I definitely experienced, people, my friends, I know people who are like that, right? And it's an incredible defense mechanism, right? Like, okay, come into anything, again, let's make a link back to, being convinced and coming in with a narrative, right? So, okay, I don't love myself, right? I cannot be loved. It's impossible, right? So, okay, but I'm still not going to, for some reason, not going to block myself off from dating. I'm still going to interact with the real world. But what happens is, okay, if you have this mental representation of you as being unlovable, everyone who loves you cannot be a respectable person. That you can't love these people. Is that?
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, you're just agreeing, but waving your head side to side to say no. So usually in society that means the opposite. But okay. Anyway, so I have, let's see if my summary of what's going on here is good, okay? So we label ourselves as unworthy of love. Then when others love us, we refer back to our mental representation of us as unlovable and deny external evidence of being lovable because someone loves us, right? It's another person. In fact, we even despise the lover because based on what we believe, they must be dishonest or just be a person who's kind of delusional, right? Like, how could they love me? So again, this is classic narrative spinning.
And that's an excellent summary.
Thank you. So, but I came in with, the assumption that I don't make good summaries, so then you're probably lying to me right now. But that's okay. So, the lover asks for reciprocation, but is irritated by it. So again, link back to illusory choice, right? Wherever you go, whichever path the other person takes, it results in unhappiness for me. You're doing great on your path to unhappiness, right? Just make it so whatever happens in the world, A or B, it leads to the same road. You're doing great, pal. You're going there. Okay?
Yep.
Any further? Okay, I'm sure you love this one.
The traps of altruism. Okay, so I thought there were 2 recommendations for unhappiness in this chapter. The first one is that whenever you do something altruistic, you should really look for all the other egoistic reasons that may have motivated your action. So what could I do if I give $10 to someone in the street and I feel good about it because I did something I think is good. But then I think about it, it's because maybe I did it because people were walking and maybe there was someone I know who was walking there and they saw me do this good action. So I will be higher in their, they will think higher of me. Or maybe I just did it because I want to feel good. And this feeling is very egoistic and I want to be happier. And so if I think like this, I'm going to realize that I'm actually a very egoistic person. I'm not the way I want to be. I'm a bad person and I don't know, my self-esteem will go down too.
I think what's incredible is that this can purely happen in retrospectively, right? You can do a pure act in the moment because, with no because, essentially, that's what a pure act is. And then just through pure retrospection, you're like, well, it made me feel good, so I must have done it so I feel better. So therefore, I did this for myself. Or as you said, right? Okay, I give a homeless man $5. I didn't think about it. But when I do think about it, there was that guy who was glancing at me and smiling when I was doing it. So maybe I did it for him, right? Mm-hmm. So it can all happen retrospectively. So again, this rumination aspect where you can create your own reality where you're an egotistic altruist. Go read my blog. Thank you for actually doing it. So again, a very beautiful quote. I forgot. Unfortunately, I didn't note who said it, but for the pure, all is pure, but the pessimist will find the Achilles heel. So if you choose to live in this pureness, it can just happen. But again, developing is probably a little bit like spontaneity because the thoughts will come up. And this is what happened when I talked to a priest. I asked him, okay, I feel like whenever I do something altruistic, I think about how it benefits me. If it's not for any other reason, it's at the very least for the fact that it makes me feel good. So what is pure altruism to you? And then he said, well, actually, I kind of suggested this idea to him, but he said, you have to just stop thinking about it too much. Like if you just drop the thinking and do the good for the good, well, this is kind of the obvious answer, but getting there is hard. But if you do the good for the good, that's pure altruism. And it does exist just in the sense that you can create it.
Just on my earlier comment about how, like, I think what makes this book special is that you see a bit of, throughout the book, you see a bit of everyone in your life in there, and you can see how people in your life definitely do these behaviors that vary in degrees and go to extremely pathological to like a little bit harmless, but still bad overall. And I found this really interesting that some people's, maybe not their whole careers, but at least a substantial part of their careers and maybe many papers are dedicated to this paradox of altruism and literally doing the exact opposite of, presumably, if this book is a satire and is proposing how to be happy, exactly what the book tells us not to do, right? Philosophers literally work to make themselves miserable by looking deeply for reasons for altruism and why we do it, when the solution, which I think seems reasonable, is just stop thinking about it, because you can spin that narrative if you want to spin that narrative.
You know, I feel like it fixes a lot of our frustration, or as some say, frustration in February with philosophy. Because, you know, they do paper, 20-page paper with every 2 words we don't understand what it is. And then our resolution is, hey, I guess we should have never asked. Like the thing we did on belief, like if you didn't ask, I think we would all be better off, you know? So I guess this is a lot of what he's saying. And in fact, I did accidentally foreshadow his solution to all of this. Because in the end, I guess I'll spoil it now because it's very close and I'm speaking about it. And in the end, the way to stop being unhappy is to realize that you were happy to begin with, and just stop deluding yourself into thinking that all of these loops exist and all of this reality in your head, and you should be anxious and no one loves you because you're unlovable and
Well, his book is about how to be unhappy for people who choose to be unhappy.
Yeah.
But don't, most people who really fall into these traps don't realize that they are choosing to be unhappy, but it's actually them that are their own actions that are feeding this unhappiness every day. So his conclusion is simply, okay, well, instead of choosing to be unhappy, choose to be happy and do all those same things.
Yeah, enter the loops just from the other, side, or not the same loops, whatever.
Yep.
Take the metaphor where you will. Next chapter is and these are not my words. For these crazy foreigners. Oh my God. So almost. So he gives a very difficult read. I was essentially stacking up on electrolytes, expecting tears to flow, but so he gives all these examples of people visiting different countries and expecting to see some behavior, but actually, some other behavior is present. All these, I guess you would call it like culture shock, or what is it? Yeah. Culture clash. That's the term. So you experience this culture clash, and this is a quick chapter, and the whole point is just coming back again to rigidity, right? If you want to be disappointed, assume that whatever behavior you have been taught and you have experienced for now is the norm everywhere and every place, every time, with everyone, right? So if if doing certain I think this is what, funny enough, for some reason, and it really doesn't have to be that way, traditions differ at the table. All these different, you have to, when you're done and you were satisfied with the food, you have to place the fork at this angle and the knife at this angle. Or the thing with Chinese food where you have to leave just a little bit on your plate to show that you're full. So, to not insult the host that they didn't give you enough food, but also only a little bit has to be left to signal that their food was actually good, and you ate up until the last bit and you just couldn't get that extra, right? Yeah, I could never. I'm gonna lick the plate. But so essentially, when interact with other cultures, or of course it can be in the same culture, interact with other people, always carry your assumptions of the past with you and assume that that's the norm, and anything that deviates from it is just out of place and kind of demential.
Yeah, and you'll be disappointed, so you'll be unhappy.
Set yourself up for that. Yep. Now, good chapter. The last one before the epilogue. So if you want to go?
Yeah, I can. So it's to consider life as a zero-sum game, or as a game in itself. So a zero-sum game is a game in which the gains of a player or a team equal the losses of the other team. So this means that whatever you gain is lost by someone else, and that whatever you lose is won by someone else.
So like life. Oh, okay.
You're following the advice.
Oh my God.
Through well
enough. It just
enough.
came up. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. And so, if you believe this of life, like you do, what would you do? You would think first that you play against other people, and that if you want to win, for sure, other people have to lose, because you cannot all win at this game. So you will. Well, he doesn't give explicit examples, I think, but you would bring other people down. You would focus on the harm you can bring to others, or the harm that can happen to others, because this is essential for you to win, because losses of others equal your own gains. And this would also mean that if someone wins or have something good happen in their life, you would have lost something, so you would be miserable again. So that's the first point, I think. Anything to say?
Yeah, it didn't really touch me, this point. I guess if we wanted an example, it's like Canadian Cégeps, right? With the R score, where you having a better grade than your classmates is what gives you the higher score.
Yeah.
So that kind of ensures an environment of competition, and even, people. There are stories of people giving each other fake notes for classes that they missed, just to hope that their class grades lower as opposed to theirs. Well,
yes. Yeah. So imagine a context, school in which you are against other people because only some of you will get to the next level or to the program you want to get in. And there will be for sure a lot of competition, less cooperation, less fun, less friendships. And if you compare this with another context in which maybe everyone helps each other because they can all reach their goals, it's not winner and loser, maybe everyone can win, well, then the environment will be better for friendships and cooperation, and everyone will be for sure happier.
Exactly. And then we get to the epilogue, and we already stated it. Dostoevsky's quote, "Man is unhappy because he does not know that he is happy. That's all. When we discover this, we instantly become happy." It's in the book Demons. So pretty solid. Rings true as all Dostoevsky things do. You reap what you sow. The ultimate thing is every single loop that we've set up that people enter through their own volition, escape that and create yourself loops of happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the main point is to realize that unhappiness, which we attribute a lot to external factors, to things that are fatal, like when we were thinking about the past at the beginning of our conversation, well, we can just spin it around and start realizing that we have something to do with it. We have power, we have free will, and most importantly, we have reason, because I think a lot of the biases and a lot of the strategies that help us be unhappy are actually overcome if we think rationally. If we think about the facts, the reality, we can realize that the other person is not mad at us, or that the situation, we don't have to avoid risks because there are no risks, in fact. So I think there's a lot of, just be rational, just think about the facts, the reality, be grounded.
So beautiful. Be rational, therefore use the scientific method, therefore consider the actual events of the present, therefore Buddhist principle of living in the present, therefore it's the links are incredible.
I think to some extent that's true about the rationality being able to lead you to a better solution, but it has its limits too, in my opinion, because I feel like rationality is the method of philosophy, and it's within philosophy that you start to question things like, did I do this altruistic the altruistic thing really for its altruism. And in those situations, it seems like you need to focus less on rationality and be spontaneous, right? The rationality part falls apart within the spontaneity. Yeah, and also when thinking about the point of it all. I think if you think about the point of it all rationally, it doesn't work. And yeah.
That makes sense. So maybe the point is not to be more rational, but to not be irrational. Not be biased. Don't.
Yeah, I would even say be biased towards the positive.
That's right, actually.
Right? Because the point of the book is the way to be unhappy is to be biased towards the negative and to always see the bad things. And I think if you approach it rationally, the world is maybe at best neutral. Isn't that right? Because we all die in the end and it doesn't matter. But if you see it in a positive way and if you spin your own narrative in a positive way, then that's the way to be happy.
So I guess if we were to push the metaphor of the yellow light, you could see the yellow light as a go and not a stop. I just came up with this. It's not on my blog. Okay, well, so but guys, I'm surprised no one asked this. What's the point of making a book on unhappiness? I just want to be happy.
Well, maybe the author.
You guys all missed it.
You know
I think that's a central flaw in the book. He really didn't think about it.
I was about to say the original title is "This Situation is Hopeless but Not Serious." So if it's not serious, I truly think there's some absurdity, like there's some Camus and absurdism in this book. So if the situation is hopeless because we all die, but it's not serious, you can honestly just choose to be happy or unhappy. It doesn't matter. So if you want to choose to be unhappy, just go for it. If you want to choose to be happy, go for it. There's not only one way to do it. It's not serious. And I wanted to ask you how you view this. At the end, there's this quote that the situation is hopeless. The solution is hopelessly simple, just choosing to be happy. But it's not serious. And did you think about this? Because this idea of life not being serious, even if it's hopeless, makes me think of another book I read a few years ago about a family with 3 children. The 2 youngest were girls, and they both died of illness before they were 5 years old. And the elder, a little boy, when he was 5 and his younger sister died, he told his parents, and that's a true story, he told his parents, "Mom, death is sad, but it's not serious." And that really struck me. It's like, if you view it like this, nothing in life is a true big deal. Nothing is really serious.
That's fair. I think when these deep kind of quotations, because this does run deep. When I read them and they don't click, I don't really give them the time of day in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we were to place this realization that it's not that serious and this was all, in your head, and you could just get out of these loops or create your own loops of happiness, it's kind of more of the step 1, step 2 thinking, right? I feel like if you were to place it somewhere, because it's still, I guess it's a realization between steps. It's somewhere, maybe you're stepping into phase 3. But phase 3, for me, is really kind of Buddhism, right? You guys earlier realized that it wasn't about rationality. It was actually a little bit not about rationality. And this Buddhist principle of, hey, it is indeed not that serious. I don't have to think about if the water is rotating clockwise or counterclockwise. Whatever comes out of my mouth is kind of right and kind of wrong. It doesn't matter. So the fix is indeed kind of anti-intellectual, I feel like. Because again, I could take this as a philosopher and be like, to be happy, I must realize that I'm already happy. But is that true? And then I could start off and write a 400-page essay like Heidegger with pretentious German words. Or you could just realize everything he's saying here. Like, suddenly, if I have a malleable theory of myself, then to be a good person, I must do good things. So, okay, let's start with day one. I'm going to start today. Well, unless I wake up at 9 a.m., then I can't start today, but whatever. So, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have much to say about your specific quote, but to me, a remedy to this is Buddhism, kind of an anti-intellectual approach. And also, this was said in the episode of Phil. As a Buddhist rationalist, as a Buddhist scientist, I also can see the beauty of the scientific method, where if you actually, a lot of these theories of kind of vanquishing narratives, right? Because narratives are unfalsifiable. So as soon as you drop that and kind of test A and not A, and then actually consider the facts, that's the scientific method. So there can be two angles of approach, or you can take both if you're a Buddhist rationalist, but not everyone has that, that advantage. Is that it?
Well, I do, maybe to conclude, we said that the recommendation is to choose to be happy, but it's not that easy. You can just say, so let's choose to be happy. But one thing would be to create a narrative in which you are happy. Create a world in which a narrative, a story, a representation of the world in which you think the world is a good place generally, or the world has opportunities that you can make the most of. Create a narrative in which, like, you have self-esteem, you think you're worth it, you're worth relationships, and then everything you see in the world, it doesn't have to be rational, but you can pick and choose interactions and stimuli that are positive, so that they are interpreted through the framework of that good narrative you have. So if I think I'm worth living, and people are worth talking to and attending to, I may see someone who smiles at me in the street as an opportunity to engage in a relationship and just smile back, and this will make my day, and I will be very happy, and I will tend to the birds that are singing and the trees that are beautiful and the kids that are playing, instead of the noise of the street and the cars that are annoying. And all those same things I told you, all those stimuli in the environment could be interpreted as negative, as distracting, as problematic, as arrogant. What is this person doing, smiling at me? I don't want to interact. I'm in my bubble. I'm just walking. I'm alone.
Exactly. Oh, okay, no, sorry, you were making a point there.
And so it's really that narrative that will guide how you interpret them and whether you're happier or not.
100%. Essentially, you can take the opposite of every single chapter and create your loop of happiness, right? Be less rigid, as we said in the beginning. Being unhappy is being rigid.
Be in the present.
Being present, blah, blah, blah.
As you said, I think it's not that simple, obviously. And if it were that simple, there would be no mental illness and everyone would be happy. And I think a big point is that it is a qualitative shift in experience. Right now, the way I am experiencing the world, for me, in a positive way, I'm speaking, I can feel warm clothes on my body, and I'm going to eat after this, and I interpret all this in a positive light. I think it would be quite literally impossible for me to convince myself or shift my experience in a way so that I experience things in a negative light. In the same way, it will be impossible for a person in the moment that is experiencing things in a negative light to say, let me be happy, and click, and there you go, here I am happy because this dog that was barking before and I was annoyed by, that's my best friend. Let me walk out of the house and hug him right now and pet him because that will bring me happiness. I think in the moment it's impossible to make that shift. And so, as you were alluding to earlier, and as we've said in earlier episodes, I think you have to help yourself. You help yourself with the environment. You cut out bad friends that do keep you in co-rumination and that keep you seeing the world in a negative light. You change your environment so that you help yourself act the way you want to act and be the person you want to be, because once again, you have that in your control. You can be that person, and you really shouldn't be putting 50,000 temptations in front of your face, let's say in the form of your phone while you're studying. If it's there and you do it and then you feel like a bad person, why don't you help yourself? Get the phone out of the way, and you can start acting in the right way, and that'll create a positive loop that over time, slowly, may bring you to this qualitative shift of seeing the world in a more positive light. But you have to help yourself.
Speaking of positive lights, this episode is sponsored by Philips. No, I wish. But Philip, our friend. Yep. He sells, candles. So I think it's a lot of entertaining what ifs, right? What if I stopped spreading the elephant powder? Would the elephants start appearing? Like, test the opposite of because rigidity was, running rampant through this book. What if I am nice to someone I meet for the first time for once? Will they take advantage of me? I feel like this is like something people who are kind of closed off and mean tell themselves, right? Okay, I can't be nice because that's vulnerability. People will take advantage of me, blah, blah. So yeah, just try the opposite once. What will be the worst thing that can happen? And entertain the opposite of the idea. And with a malleable theory, if you can develop that, but you can also develop that just through, considering the opposite of whatever you're thinking right now, evidence will stack up that you may not have been right in the first place. And the more it stacks up, and the more you attend to it, of course, you can't ignore it, the more your unhappiness will go away, if that's what you're trying to defeat. It feels like that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Be adaptable.
Yeah, adaptable. Thank you for the suggestion of the book.
You're welcome. I'm glad we read it in French.
Yeah, but, well, yeah, thank gosh for that. Good one. So, okay. Let's do our ratings.
1, 2, 3, 9.
Why not 10? Because we still haven't figured out why it recommends being unhappy.
Well, a lot of these ratings are purely based on feeling.
I know.
They really are.
It's not rational.
It's not rational. And I do have this, pretty solid theory of never being perfect.
I agree.
Right? And so I couldn't even allow myself to put a 10 on any episode.
Oh, you have.
Does that sound relatable?
You have.
Yeah, but does that sound relatable to you? Okay. Well, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot for Anna, the first thinking cis, to really deliver on her first live episode, whatever that means. So go to thinkinbros.com for more information on my blog, of course. I'm talking to you, Alex, and
Speak
only
faster.
you. Thanks a lot to Philip for sponsoring us. He sells candles. And go to Thinkin Bros. Well, contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com for more information and answer our question. We'll see you next week. This was Chris.
Thank you to all our fan. See ya.